Welcome back. Tonight we're exploring a name that gets quoted like a warning sign. Friedrich Nietzsche. Rowan. People hear him and think, darkness, nihilism, danger. Is that the real Nietzsche?
It's the shadow of Nietzsche, not the man. He can sound like a storm, yes, but inside that storm is a fragile, brilliant human being trying to stay honest while the old certainties of Europe are collapsing.
So we're not doing edgy quotes tonight. We're doing the life, the ideas, and why they still hit so hard.
Exactly. We'll move through his childhood, his rise, his isolation, the ideas that made him infamous, his collapse, and what the world later did with his voice.
All right, start us at the beginning, before the myth. Who was the boy?
Nietzsche was born in 1844. Very early, life taught him loss. His father, a pastor, died while Nietzsche was still a child. He grew up in a household of women, mother, grandmother, aunts, surrounded by discipline, expectation, and a heavy quiet.
That kind of early grief doesn't always make you louder. Sometimes it makes you observant.
Exactly. He was sensitive, inward, extremely bright. The questions that later become philosophy, meaning, suffering, faith, strength, arrived before he had the language for them.
And academically, he was a phenomenon, right?
Yes. Classical languages, literature, philology, he excelled. And in his early 20s, he became a university professor. From the outside, success. Inside, restlessness.
Restlessness meaning he already felt the culture cracking?
He sensed that Europe's confidence was partly performance. Tradition, morality, religion. People still spoke those words, but the inner belief was weakening. He felt that gap, and he couldn't unsee it. He takes a post at Basel, astonishingly young, and enters the world of respectable scholarship. But even there, his body fights him. He battles headaches, stomach illness, insomnia conditions that make ordinary routine feel like climbing a mountain.
So the genius professor story is already carried on a weak frame.
Oh, yes. And he also tastes war briefly, serving as a medical orderly during the Franco-Prussian conflict. He sees suffering up close, not as an idea. That encounter with human fragility never leaves his writing.
Which makes his later obsession with strength feel less like arrogance and more like necessity. Then comes Wagner, the mentor, the giant presence.
Even before the break, Nietzsche writes The Birth of Tragedy, where he contrasts two forces in art and life. The Apollonian order, clarity, form, and the Dionysian ecstasy, chaos, raw vitality. He believes great culture needs both.
So he starts with art, not ethics.
Yes, because art was his first language of meaning. He feared a culture that becomes too tidy, too moralized, too afraid of intensity. That fear later grows into his critique of morality itself.
That makes the Wagner chapter feel like the bridge between art and philosophy.
Nietzsche meets Richard Wagner and is captivated. Wagner looked like art, rebellion, a new cultural future. For Nietzsche, it wasn't only admiration, it was emotional relief, almost like finding a lost father figure.
Yeah, and then betrayal.
Slowly, he sees ego and ideology creeping in. Nationalism, manipulation, art used as a tool. Nietzsche hated beautiful lies. The friendship fractures, and the fracture hardens his independence.
So losing Wagner didn't just hurt him, it made him himself.
Yes. And then he does something most people never dare. He walks away from safety. Health problems, migraines, vision issues, constant pain make teaching unbearable. He resigns and becomes a wandering thinker, moving between Switzerland and Italy, living in small rooms, writing for almost no audience. He lives cheaply on a small pension. Some days he can barely see the page. He writes in bursts, then collapses into darkness. And yet he keeps returning to the work with almost stubborn tenderness.
Was he aware that nobody was listening?
Painfully. He sends books to friends and gets silence. Reviews are rare. He often feels like he's speaking into a void. That loneliness becomes fuel. If no one will validate him, he will at least be truthful. In places like Sils Maria, he walks for hours. He drafts ideas while moving, then rushes home to capture them. His philosophy is literally written on the road, born from solitude and motion.
That's oddly cinematic. A man fighting for meaning with a notebook and his own legs. That sounds lonely in a very physical way, like your world shrinks to a desk in your own mind.
Exactly. But isolation did something paradoxical. It sharpened his voice. He no longer wrote to please institutions. He wrote like someone with nothing left to protect except truth.
This is where the famous line arrives. God is dead. People quote it like a victory lap.
Nietzsche meant it as diagnosis, not celebration. He's saying the moral and spiritual framework that held Europe together is losing power. When that happens, meaning becomes unstable, and a culture without a replacement is vulnerable. Confusion, herd mentality, cynicism, manipulation.
So the real danger to him is nihilism. Not nothing exists, but nothing is worth it.
Yes, losing the will to live fully. Nietzsche's project is, if the old meaning collapses, will we collapse with it? Or will we become mature enough to create meaning honestly?
That leads to his revaluation of values. Sounds academic, but it's basically stop inheriting your life.
Exactly. He asks where our morals come from. Are they born from strength and honesty, or from fear, resentment, and the need to control? He's not cheering cruelty. He's demanding that we stop lying about why we call something good.
Which makes people uncomfortable, because it takes away the easy halo.
In Genealogy, he describes how values can grow out of resentment. When people feel powerless, they sometimes rename their weakness as virtue. Obedience becomes goodness, and strength becomes evil. Nietzsche's point isn't to praise cruelty, it's to expose psychological origins. He often targets what he calls priestly moralities, a moral system that gains power by declaring natural human impulses sinful and then offering forgiveness as control. Again, it's psychological. Who benefits when guilt becomes the central emotion?
So he's not saying be selfish. He's saying notice when guilt is being weaponized.
Exactly. His critique is aimed at manipulation and self-deception. He believed guilt can be useful when it teaches responsibility, but poisonous when it becomes a permanent identity.
That hits hard for anyone who grew up feeling like they were wrong for simply being human, so he's doing moral archaeology, digging beneath the polite surface.
Exactly. He wants people to stop outsourcing their conscience to slogans. He asks, is your morality helping you grow or helping you hide?
And that's why people either love him or feel personally attacked.
Because he doesn't critique society in the abstract. He turns the question inward, toward the listener. It does. Nietzsche treats the human being as responsible. No hiding behind tradition. No hiding behind the crowd.
And he writes the books that become landmarks.
During this period, he produces works that read like philosophy and literature fused. Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Beyond Good and Evil, and On the Genealogy of Morality. They're not gentle textbooks. They're meant to wake you up. He writes in aphorisms, short, sharp flashes, because he mistrusts systems that pretend to explain everything. And in Zarathustra, he writes like a poet-prophet, using parable and rhythm. It's philosophy that tries to move your nervous system, not just your intellect.
So if someone reads him and thinks, why is this so intense? That's the point.
Yes. He wanted to disrupt sleepwalking, not with cruelty, but with urgency.
Let's talk about the most misunderstood idea, the Übermensch.
The overman is not a dictator. It's a symbol for transformation, self-overcoming. A person who creates values rather than borrowing them, who can face truth without collapsing, who turns suffering into depth instead of bitterness.
So strength here is inner strength, discipline, clarity, courage.
Yes, strength is self-mastery, not domination, not domination.
Another phrase people throw around is will to power. That sounds like domination. Is that what he meant?
Not primarily. For Nietzsche, power is often the energy of life itself. The drive to expand, to create, to overcome inertia. In art, it's creation. In psychology, it's growth. In ethics, it's becoming more capable of truth.
So it can be quiet. Not rule others, but stop being ruled by fear.
Yes. The healthiest will to powers is self-direction, turning chaos into form, turning pain into insight, turning a scattered life into an authored life.
That makes the idea feel less dangerous, more human. When I read about him, I don't see a cold monster. I see someone aching for connection.
He longed for closeness, but rarely found it. He had complicated relationships, and rejection hurt him, especially the painful episode involving Lou Andreas Salome. Loneliness wasn't a concept. It was his daily weather.
Which makes his insistence on dignity feel earned. Okay, here's a part that surprises people. Nietzsche isn't a philosopher of despair. He talks about affirming life.
One of his deepest ideas is amor fati, love of fate, not naive optimism, a courageous embrace of life as it is. He asks a brutal test. If you had to live your life again and again, with every joy and every pain repeated, could you still say yes?
That question is terrifying, but it's also strangely clarifying.
Eternal recurrence works like a psychological mirror. If the thought of repeating your life feels unbearable, it points to what you're avoiding, choices you're postponing, truth you're refusing, parts of yourself you're betraying.
So it's not science fiction. It's a tool for honesty.
Exactly. And that's why it can be strangely hopeful. It suggests you can reshape your life into something you could affirm, not by perfection, but by alignment.
That lands hard in the modern world. Endless feeds, endless comparison, endless noise.
Nietzsche would say, if you let the crowd write your script, you'll never be able to say yes to your own life. You'll only perform it, because it asks whether you're merely enduring existence or participating in it with authorship.
And yet, for him, the body doesn't cooperate.
His health deteriorates. Pain becomes constant. Isolation deepens. He's still not widely read, still not supported. He pushes himself into his final works with an intensity that looks like survival.
Then comes 1889, Turin.
Yes, the famous scene, a horse being beaten, Nietzsche rushing to it, embracing it, breaking down. Whether every detail is perfect or not, the reality is clear. His mind collapses. The philosopher who demanded lucidity loses the ability to hold lucidity.
That is one of the most heartbreaking endings in intellectual history.
After that, he never returns to philosophical writing. He lives under care-first friends, then his mother, then his sister. His fierce independence disappears.
And then the story gets darker in a different way. What happens to his work when he can't protect it?
His sister, Elizabeth, gains control and reshapes his legacy. She had ideological commitments Nietzsche would have despised. She edits, selects, frames fragments, turning a radically individual philosophy into something that could be used as a tool of power.
So for a long time, the public meets a distorted Nietzsche.
Exactly. Misread, misused, turned into a symbol for movements he warned against. The tragedy is that he fought herd thinking and the corruption of power, and then his words were bent toward both.
But time also corrects.
Yes. Scholars return to the original texts. Readers begin to hear his real voice, and slowly Nietzsche becomes what he actually was, a fierce critic of dishonest morality, a thinker of responsibility, and a writer obsessed with the dignity of the human spirit. The most infamous misuse comes in the early 20th century, when propagandists cherry-pick phrases like will to powers and overman to justify collective violence. But Nietzsche despised mass movements and anti-intellectual obedience. He warned against the herd precisely because it can become cruel in the name of belonging.
So the irony is brutal. He was turned into a mascot for the thing he feared.
Exactly. And that's why careful reading matters. Nietzsche is difficult, but he's not a blank check. The texture of his work, its compassion for the struggling human, gets lost when you use him as a slogan.
Which is also a very modern problem. People don't read, they extract.
Wow. Yes. And Nietzsche anticipated that too. He wanted slow readers, honest readers, people willing to be changed, not just entertained.
That's why modern psychology kept listening.
Exactly. Thinkers like Jung engaged him because Nietzsche anticipated a modern crisis, the emptiness that appears when inherited, certainty collapses, and the pressure to build identity in a loud, unstable world.
It's eerie how much he sounds like he's talking to the 21st century.
After his collapse, he lives for years in near silence. The world continues, industrializes, modernizes, and he becomes a ghost who is still alive. He dies in 1900, never seeing fame, never seeing vindication.
And then the 20th century arrives and suddenly everyone is wrestling with the problems he predicted.
Exactly! Existentialism, modern psychology, debates about identity, authenticity, the death of old certainties. Nietzsche becomes a kind of early warning system, not because he had answers, but because he saw the shape of the crisis.
So when people say he's relevant, it's not trendy, it's structural.
He warns that when you let the crowd define you, you become anxious, restless, always seeking validation. His answer is inner authorship. Consciously choose what matters, cultivate strength, stop confusing comfort with meaning.
So Nietzsche's legacy isn't worship. It's a mirror and a challenge.
Yes, become an individual, create values, say yes to life without illusions.
Before we bring Margaret in, can we make this tangible? If someone wants to use as Nietzsche without turning him into a poster, What do they do tomorrow morning?
I'd offer 3 gentle practices. First, a value audit. Write the 5 things you say you value, then ask which ones you actually live. Second, a small act of self-overcoming, one disciplined choice that aligns you with who you want to be. And third, a dose of solitude without escape. Not doom-scrolling solitude, real silence. Nietzsche believed you can't hear your true priorities when the crowd is constantly speaking inside your head.
So the point isn't to become Nietzschean. The point is to become more honest.
Exactly. Nietzsche doesn't ask you to adopt his conclusions. He asks you to stop living unconsciously.
That already feels like a medicine for our era. Before we close, we promise something practical. If someone listening wants to explore Nietzsche properly, not through internet quotes, where do they start? Margaret, welcome.
Thank you, Clara. I'm delighted to join you both. And yes, Nietzsche is best approached through his own voice first, and then with a good guide beside you.
Give us the doorway books, and please keep it friendly for newcomers.
For meeting Nietzsche directly, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, poetic, strange, alive. If that feels too wild as a first step, Beyond Good and Evil offers a more structured entry. And On the Genealogy of Moralities is extraordinary for understanding where values come from. A small tip with Zarathustra: don't try to understand everything on the first pass. Let it wash over you, then return later. With Beyond Good and Evil, keep a pencil. He's challenging your assumptions line by line. And with the genealogy, notice how often he's analyzing emotions, shame, pride, resentment, because he's treating morality as something lived in the body, not just argued in a classroom.
That's such a helpful way to frame it. Like, read with your mind, but also with your self-awareness.
They can be, so take them slowly. Nietzsche is not meant to be consumed quickly. He's someone you walk with.
And what about companions writers who help you read him without flattening him?
Walter Kaufmann is essential. His book, Nietzsche, Philosopher, Psychologist, Antichrist, helped rescue Nietzsche from decades of misunderstanding. Rudiger Safransky's biography, Nietzsche, a philosophical biography, is also beautifully human and emotionally aware. Kaufmann is especially good at separating Nietzsche from caricatures. He shows where Nietzsche is provocative on purpose, and where he's actually careful, even ethical, in a non-traditional way. Safransky, meanwhile, gives you atmosphere. The Europe Nietzsche walked through, the emotional cost of his solitude, the way illness shaped his tempo. It helps you read the books with compassion.
That matters. Otherwise, people read him like a villain.
Exactly. When you remember the human being, the philosophy becomes harder, but also more honest.
What about a careful scholarly portrait? Something rigorous?
Julian Jung's Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosophical biography, is excellent for that. And Alexander Nehamas's Nietzsche, Life as Literature, is a fascinating way to see Nietzsche's ideas as a practice of self-creation.
And for listeners who want the bridge to psychology and the modern inner life,
then read Nietzsche alongside Carl Jung. Jung didn't always agree with him, but he took him seriously. Their conversation, across time, can feel like a deep exploration of the modern soul.
Margaret, thank you. Those aren't just titles, they're paths. Rowan, one final reflection. If we had to summarize what Nietzsche leaves us without hype, what is it?
A challenge wrapped in compassion. He shows that a fragile, hurting human being can still produce ideas strong enough to reshape the world. He leaves us the courage to look honestly, to question what we inherited, and to build meaning with responsibility instead of pretending life is simple.
And maybe the gentlest part of Nietzsche is this: he refuses to lie about the dark so we can find a light that's real.
Exactly. Not certainty, not perfection, but transformation, step by step into a life that is consciously lived.
One more thought before we go. People online use Nietzsche to sound tough, but the real tone I'm hearing tonight is vulnerability with spine.
That's a perfect description. Nietzsche's motto could be, become who you are. Not who the crowd demands, not who fear designs, who you are when you stop performing.
And that doesn't happen in one heroic leap. It happens in boring daily choices.
Yes, choosing honesty, choosing responsibility, choosing depth over distraction. Those are small acts of self-overcoming, repeated until they become character.
If listeners only remember one line, let it be this: don't treat him as a weapon, treat him as a mirror.
And read him slowly. The internet version of Nietzsche is loud. The real Nietzsche is demanding, but often quietly compassionate.
As always, everything you heard tonight is created as an educational and storytelling program. We encourage you to read the original texts and form your own view, slowly, carefully, in good faith.
And remember, philosophers are not mascots, they're conversations. If Nietzsche stirred you, that's not a problem. It's an invitation to look at your own life with more clarity.
If you enjoyed this format, dialogue, story, and a reading path, follow the channel so you don't miss the next episode. We'll keep it thoughtful, human, and grounded. Alright, breathe, take one idea with you, not 10, we'll meet again soon. That's our show for tonight. If this conversation helped you see Nietzsche as more human and more useful, then we did our job. Take care, and we'll see you next time.